All right, if you don't mind, let's spend one more lesson discussing mobile optimization. So here's the new Laracast site on mobile, and immediately you can see, oh, there's some issues. And I'm showing you this because this is the simple reality. People will shout from rooftops that you need to think mobile first, and in general, it's honestly good advice. But in the real world, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Sometimes you're handed a Photoshop file, and you don't even know what it should look like for mobile devices just yet. So I show you this as an example of, oh, it looks great on desktop. I'm not going to show you that, by the way, because I still want this new design to be somewhat of a surprise when it's released. But yeah, you can see on mobile, oh, it's totally messed up. So let's go through some of the tweaks together, and then we can make mental notes in the future for what we should avoid and what we should always preface with a breakpoint. Okay, so the first thing I see here is, as you can imagine, on a desktop layout, they all have adequate space. But once we shrink it down to mobile, in order to fit all of those on their own line, it ends up looking horrible. And by the way, you will see that I have this icon selected in Google Chrome, and that is so we can view it, in this case, using an iPhone X. But of course, you can switch that to anything you need. Anyways, I'm going to select one of these so I can quickly switch to it. And I see a couple of things. First, it looks like a width was hard-coded. And generally, I'm not going to beat you up if you occasionally reference a style tag for something very specific. However, this approach very much breaks down in situations like this. Well, yeah, on desktop, maybe a width of 150 pixels is fine, but on mobile, I kind of just want it to take up the full room, so I would want to remove that entirely. Okay, I think that's our step one. So I'm going to go to my skills page. So you'll see right here for each of these sections. So each one of these represents one of these, one of these, and one of these. Okay, so yeah, you can see at some point I hard-coded a width. I do not want that anymore. So I'm going to remove it. And instead, for situations like this where you can't use a predefined width value that Tailwind will provide, this is when you defer to a traditional class. So we might say home skills section. So this has an ID of home skills, so I'm just going to follow that convention. This is each section, and I will apply it here. That way I can then use breakpoints to specify the width. So let's go to my home.sas file, and you can see a couple of things here, like where I'm applying a custom background image and adjusting it a little bit if we are on super widescreen devices. But yeah, let's just go ahead and put it here, home skills section, and I can bring back the functionality we had before. But now I'm going to say, well, for tablets, I want the width to be 150 pixels. Now, in this case, I have a little helper to target mobile or tablet or desktop devices, nice and clean. But yeah, you won't get that out of the box. So if you're using something like Tailwind, two choices. You can't, real quick, you can't do things like this. Apply medium Tailwind width is 32. That's not going to work. And in fact, if I try to compile that down, it should blow up. And it does. So instead, yeah, you have two choices. One, you could wrap it within a media query and hard-code it, something like that. Yeah, you could do that. And I'm getting this value 576 from my Tailwind file. So if we look for that, that is the small screen size. But you might be thinking, well, it defeats the purpose if I have to hard-code this everywhere. And I would agree. So instead, there is a helper you can use. There is a screen directive, I guess you'd call it. And we'll say for a medium screen width, then apply a width of 150 pixels. Anyways, that's definitely a good one to know. So keep that in mind. Or by the way, you can also put it outside here. So this translates to give me a media query where the minimum width is 768 pixels, something like that. And in that case, we want this class to have a width of 150 pixels. Okay, anyways, if we come back to Chrome and give it a hard refresh, at this breakpoint for mobile devices, we no longer have a width of 150 pixels, but it still doesn't solve the problem. So here's the issue if we take a look. You'll see if I close this up, we have three different sections, one for the number of hours of learning, one for the number of lessons, and one for the number of full series. So within the wrapper, we're applying flexbox, and the default is a row, as we've learned. So often, if you're just thinking, well, once we get to around a tablet, we do want these to be in a row. But before that, they can be stacked on top of each other. If that's the case, always precede these with the medium breakpoint. So now if we run it on mobile, this is what we get. But once we grow to a medium breakpoint, they would once again display left to right. So yeah, now you can see often you'll be in situations where you think, okay, well, for mobile, we want a margin bottom of 6 or something like that. So let me copy that just to give a little bit of breathing room. One there and one there. Okay, now this is looking the way I want. But because Tailwind is mobile first, well, we applied margin bottom 6, and I don't necessarily want that for desktop. So again, in situations like this, you might want to say, well, once we get to the medium breakpoint, zero out that margin bottom. Anyhow, these are the things that you should be thinking about whenever you're applying flexbox, or you're applying margin, or you're setting a width. You've done this surely before, where you think, okay, this section should be about 75% of the width. I don't want it to take up all the room. But you have to remember, on mobile devices, it's still going to take up 75% of the width. But you probably want it to take up the full 100% once the screen real estate has reduced, right? Try to tweak your thinking to accommodate these things. So now you would say, well, yeah, I want 75% width on this section, but you know what? Only beginning at a tablet level do I want that. So I will add the necessary prefix. Now, if we scroll down, yeah, we're going to have the exact same thing up here. So as you can imagine, and once again, I don't want to show you because we haven't released the design yet, and I want it to be a surprise. But we have 5 different sections here that show each of the various skills. So you'll see I call it skill card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's so many to the point that even when we decrease the width as much as possible to fit them in a row, it still looks like crap. So again, these are situations where we need to think, well, for mobile, do we want something different entirely? And this is where you need to talk with the UI person, with the designer. And they may say, yeah, you know what, we can get rid of the background colors. We'll just use little buttons or whatever they decide. Or they might say, in this situation, that's really important. So again, you can stack them. So if that's the case, you go, all right, well, I don't want these to display as a row for mobile. So instead, we will activate it at the medium level, medium breakpoint. Okay, now we have them on top of each other. Okay, that's looking better, but clearly we need some margin below each one. So something like this, as you see there, and then you would need to reset that. At the medium breakpoint, no margin bottom. But also I can see that it's not perfectly centered. We have all this extra room over here versus over here. So usually this is going to be either some extra padding you've applied, some extra margin right you've applied, or in this case, it might even be a width that we've applied. So let's take a look. Bring this up, and let's see, skill card. So I'm going to scroll down. Yeah, so we can see once again, we've hard-coded a width of 250 pixels there. So I bet if I remove that, it will expand to take up all of the available space. So again, we have to decide, on mobile devices, do we want this to stretch for the full width? Or if you want to limit it to 200, because I do think it looks better like that, well then maybe we just need to make sure that we center all of the items. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to my computed tab. All right, that looks okay. So why don't let's just try setting the margin for the left and right to auto. There we go. We can see that's now perfectly centered for mobile users, as you see there. So again, it sounds like we would have to say margin auto, but then maybe at a medium breakpoint, you can zero that out or update it to whatever it needs to be. And if it ever gets too complex, again, this is where you would default back to a traditional class, like in your CSS file. Because here we can see, all right, we want margin bottom 6, but at a medium breakpoint, margin bottom 0. But then we're also saying margin auto, and this would be for the left and right. You can see it's starting to get a little clunky. So if it keeps pushing in that direction, yeah, you might want to instead put all of that within the CSS file. But nonetheless, we would update that one, and of course, this one as well. So now we have the skills there, we have the list of the series, and this is the way it goes, piece by piece. You take a look at a section. Is there anything weird here that we didn't anticipate for mobile? And again, over and over, it's going to be something like, oh, you set flexbox, but you don't really want that for mobile. And over, it's going to be something like, oh, you set flexbox, but you didn't actually want a display of flex for mobile. So you need to reset that or conditionally activate it at the medium breakpoint level. Or it will be something like you hard-coded a width here, but you didn't think about mobile. Or you set margin right 10, but you don't actually want that again on mobile. You only wanted that once you had a little more screen real estate. These are all things you need to think about.